On April 14, 2023, in the city of Los Angeles, California, a private wedding was held between a young Muslim couple who had been engaged for nearly a year. The bride, 26-year-old Layla Rahmani, was born and raised in Anaheim, while the groom, 30-year-old Omar al-Saeed, came from conservative Middle Eastern immigrant family. The wedding took place at a small banquet hall in downtown LA, attended by close family and friends. What began as a celebration of love and unity would soon turn into a tragic and shocking crime that left the entire community in disbelief. Layla Rahmani was a 26-year-old Muslim woman who had spent most of her life in Anaheim, California. She was born into a moderately religious family that valued education, personal independence, and cultural respect. Layla graduated from the University of Southern California with a degree in graphic design and worked as a freelance designer while helping her parents manage their small catering business. Her friends describe her as kind, artistic, and independent. Layla had grown up in a multicultural environment and believed in blending tradition with modern values. Though she respected her religious and cultural roots, she also believed in personal freedom and privacy, especially regarding her past relationships, which she chose not to share openly. Omar al-Saeed, 30, was originally from Jordan and had moved to the United States 8 years earlier. He came to Los Angeles on a student visa and later transitioned into a work permit, securing a job as a civil engineer. Omar's family held strong traditional values. His parents had arranged his first engagement back in Jordan, but it had ended quietly before he moved. When he met Layla through mutual family friends at a community event, he was immediately impressed by her appearance, confidence, and intelligence. Over several months, they began speaking regularly under the supervision of their families. Eventually, both families agreed to a formal engagement with a wedding date set for the following year. During this time, Omar and Layla maintained a relatively conservative relationship. While they spent time together, they avoided physical intimacy due to religious and family expectations. Layla believed that trust and understanding were more important to build first. Omar, however, came from a background where a woman's virginity was considered essential before marriage, a belief he held closely even while living in the U.S. Throughout the engagement, Layla worked hard to maintain peace between their two family cultures. Her parents were more flexible and supportive of her independence, but Omar's family had strong opinions on how a good wife should behave. Despite these differences, the wedding went ahead as planned. Layla wore traditional white dress with a hijab, while Omar wore a formal and jacket. The venue was simple but elegant, filled with floral decorations and soft lights. Friends and relatives from both sides attended the ceremony, and for most of the day, everything appeared to be going well. Layla and Omar held hands during the vows. They exchanged smiles and shared quiet words in Arabic. Layla's friends noted how beautiful she looked and how content she seemed. Omar, while quieter than usual, also appeared calm and respectful. After the official ceremony, guests enjoyed dinner and dancing. Photos were taken, blessings were given, and many commented on how happy the couple looked together. Later that evening, the newlyweds checked into a hotel suite in downtown Los Angeles for their wedding night. It was meant to be a private and joyful moment to begin their married life. Layla had taken extra care in preparing for the night. She brought along a set of new clothes, perfume, and had written a letter to Omar expressing her hopes for a future filled with love, partnership, and mutual respect. What neither of them knew was that the night would not unfold as planned. under the surface, doubts and expectations that had been suppressed throughout their relationship would suddenly resurface. A single conversation or small discovery would soon turn a peaceful wedding night into a tragic encounter. Omar, who had once seemed quiet and composed, would reveal a side of himself that no one, especially Isla, had anticipated. And in that hotel room, the lives of both families would change forever. After the wedding celebrations ended, Omar and Isla left the venue in a hired car and arrived at their hotel suite around 11:30 p.m. The suite was quiet, well decorated and luxurious, reserved for them by Omar's father as a gift. Isla felt nervous but excited. She was ready to start her new life and looked forward to finally having a private moment with her husband. Omar, on the other hand, was quieter than usual. He appeared tense, checking his phone several times, and avoiding eye contact. Once inside the room, Isla changed into a modest silk gown and gave Omar the handwritten letter she had prepared. In the letter, she spoke about her love for him, her desire to build a strong and equal marriage, and how much she looked forward to building a future together. Omar read it quietly but didn't say much afterward. Instead, he sat on the edge of the bed, looking down at the floor. Isla asked if something was wrong, but Omar simply replied, "I'm just tired." Trying to lighten the mood, Isla walked over to sit beside him and gently rested her hand on his shoulder. She spoke softly, saying, "We made it through the big day. Everything went well, right?" Omar nodded but didn't smile. Then, after a few seconds of silence, he asked her a question that changed the tone of the night completely. "Lila," he said, "I want to ask you something. Please tell me the truth." Isla, a little surprised, nodded and said, "Of course. What is it?" Omar looked at her with a serious expression. Are you still a virgin?" The question caught Isla off guard. She stayed quiet for a moment, unsure how to respond. Then calmly, she replied, "Omar, I don't think that question is necessary anymore. We're married now. We should focus on building trust, not testing each other." But Omar wasn't satisfied with that answer. He repeated the question, this time more firmly. "Just answer me. I need to know." Isla took a deep breath. She knew that telling the truth could upset him, but she also believed that honesty was the right path in a marriage. So she answered carefully, "No, I'm not. I've had a relationship in the past, but that was years ago, long before I met you. I didn't think it was something that defined me. I didn't hide it. I just didn't think it mattered anymore." Omar stared at her in silence. His expression changed from confusion to disbelief and then to anger. "You lied to me," he said coldly. "You knew what this meant to me. You knew how important this is to my family." "I never lied," Isla said firmly. "You never asked until now, and I never pretended to be someone I'm not." Omar stood up and began pacing the room. He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched. "So I married someone who gave herself to another man," he said loudly. "How do you expect me to accept that? How do you think my family would react?" Isla stood up too, trying to keep calm. "Omar, I am still the same person. You asked to marry. I love you. I respect you. But if you believe my worth is based on one part of my past, then maybe we rushed into this." Her words only made him more upset. Omar picked up her letter and tore it in half. "You fooled me," he muttered. "You fooled all of us." Isla was shocked by his reaction. She stepped back, now visibly afraid. "Omar, stop this. You're scaring me." But Omar was no longer listening. His Mine was filled with anger, shame, and the pressure of family expectations. In his worldview, he believed that her past had dishonored him. That belief, however, flawed, pushed him toward a dark and irreversible decision. He began shouting about betrayal and shame. Isla tried to leave the room, reaching for her phone, but Omar grabbed her arm and pushed her away. The situation quickly escalated into physical aggression. No one was there to intervene. The hotel suite, once a place for peace and intimacy, became the scene of a deadly act driven by rage and misunderstanding. The night ended not with love, but with tragedy. By the early hours of the morning, emergency services were called to the hotel by staff who heard noises and saw signs of a struggle. Paramedics found Isla unresponsive and police arrested Omar on the scene. The morning after the incident, Los Angeles police took Omar Al-Sayed into custody without resistance. He remained silent during the arrest, showing no signs of remorse or confusion. The officers noted that he appeared calm but emotionally detached. Layla Romani was pronounced dead at the scene by paramedics at 2:38 a.m. due to blunt force trauma and strangulation. A crime scene investigation began immediately, and the hotel was placed under restricted access. News of the murder quickly reached both families. Layla's parents were devastated. They had just celebrated their daughter's wedding hours earlier and now faced the unthinkable. Her mother fainted upon hearing the news, and her father had to be hospitalized due to a panic-induced medical emergency. Meanwhile, Omar's family initially refused to believe what had happened. They insisted that there must have been a misunderstanding, a mistake, or possibly even another person involved. However, the evidence told a clear story. The room showed signs of a violent struggle. Broken glass, scattered belongings, torn clothing, and blood stains were documented. Layla's phone was found shattered near the bathroom, and surveillance footage showed Omar leaving the room alone and visibly agitated. He had made no attempt to call for help or report any incident. Omar was taken to the downtown Los Angeles Detention Center and placed under suicide watch. During initial questioning, he refused to answer any questions without an attorney present. His silence continued for days, further frustrating investigators. Meanwhile, Isla's friends and colleagues took to social media to express their shock and sorrow. Many of them knew Isla as a kind, independent woman with a passion for design and a hopeful outlook on life. The news of her murder spread across various online platforms, and soon, national outlets picked up the story, raising questions about honor, cultural conflict, and domestic violence. A few days later, a preliminary court hearing was held. Omar was formally charged with second-degree murder, although the prosecution signaled that they might pursue a first-degree charge depending on evidence of premeditation. The courtroom was filled with reporters, activists, and members of the local Muslim community, some of whom came to support Layla's family, while others were there out of concern for how the incident might reflect on cultural traditions. In the days that followed, police and prosecutors worked to build a full timeline of events. Investigators interviewed hotel staff, reviewed text messages between Layla and Omar, and collected witness testimonies from wedding guests. One detail that stood out was a voice message Isla had sent to a friend only 1 hour before the incident. In it, she expressed concern about Omar's cold behavior after the wedding. "He hasn't said a word to me since we got here," she said in the recording. "I feel like something is wrong, but I can't tell what." This message became a critical piece of emotional evidence in the case, suggesting that Isla had sensed danger but didn't have time to react fully. In The days leading up to the wedding, Isla had also confided in two close friends about her anxiety regarding Omar's traditional beliefs and their potential impact on the marriage. Still, she hoped that love and time would help them understand each other. Omar's defense team began preparing a strategy focused on cultural pressure, mental instability, and emotional distress. They argued that Omar had experienced a psychological breakdown triggered by learning information that clashed with his deeply held beliefs and expectations about marriage. The defense tried to position him as someone caught between cultures, claiming that he had been raised with strict ideas about purity and honor that created a personal crisis once those expectations were challenged. Prosecutors, however, focus on intent. They highlighted Omar's prior comments to friends and relatives about his ideal wife and his belief that certain standards must be met before marriage. They presented text conversations where Omar had expressed disappointment in modern women and even hinted that he would not tolerate lies or hidden pasts. The prosecutors painted a picture of a man whose mindset was rigid and potentially dangerous. Meanwhile, Layla's funeral was held in Anaheim, attended by hundreds of people from across the community. The service was peaceful, filled with prayers, flowers, and moments of silence. Many speakers, including Isla's university professors and childhood friends, described her as a bridge between cultures, someone who stood for compassion, creativity, and independence. As the weeks passed and the trial date approached, public attention intensified. Online discussions grew polarized. Some commentators focused on the cultural aspects, questioning how traditions should evolve in modern society. Others emphasized the importance of individual accountability, stating that Omar's beliefs could never justify violence. Advocacy groups against domestic violence used Layla's story as a call to strengthen protections for women in newlywed or immigrant communities, where pressures of shame and reputation can create hidden dangers. By the end of the second month, over 40 witnesses were listed for the trial, including hotel staff, family members, cultural experts, and psychologists. The prosecutors were determined to seek the maximum penalty, while the defense hoped to avoid life imprisonment by arguing diminished responsibility. Though Omar had yet to speak publicly, his silence had already shaped the case. The courtroom, once a place of justice and procedure, now became a space where cultural belief, personal history, and legal standards would collide. The trial of Omar Al-Said began on August 21st, 2023 at the Los Angeles County Superior Court. The courtroom was filled with reporters, activists, legal observers, and members of both Isla and Omar's families. Security was tight. The judge assigned to the case, Honorable Miriam Duca, was known for a calm, fair manner and for handling several high-profile cases involving domestic violence and immigrant communities. From the start, the prosecution made it clear that their goal was to prove premeditated murder. Deputy District Attorney Carlos Ramirez, who led the case, opened with a firm statement. This is not a crime of passion. This is not an accident. This is a deliberate act rooted in control, personal expectation, and rage. The prosecution's first witnesses included hotel staff and forensic experts. One hotel employee testified that around 2 a.m. she heard loud banging noises and something that sounded like furniture being pushed violently. She alerted security, but by the time staff arrived at the room, Omar had already called the front desk to say, "Everything is fine." This added suspicion. Forensic specialists then described the scene in detail. They explained that Isla had suffered multiple injuries consistent with manual strangulation, and blunt force trauma to the head. The blood pattern analysis suggested she tried to fight back. Isla's broken fingernails, torn dress, and defensive wounds on her arm supported this claim. Photographs of the scene were shown to the jury, though Judge Duca restricted graphic images to protect dignity. Next, Isla's clothes. Friends took the stand. They described Isla's emotional state before the wedding, her anxiety about Omar's strong views, and the voice message she left on the night of her death. Her best friend, Amina Khalil, testified. She told me she was trying her best to build a future with him. She said, I know he's traditional, but I believe in love and in compromise. Isla never imagined he would hurt her. She trusted him. The most powerful moment came when Isla's mother testified. Her voice broke several times, but she spoke clearly about the last time she saw her daughter alive and how proud she was of the woman Isla had become. Her testimony had a strong emotional impact on the jury. The defense, led by attorney Marcus Wallace, took a different approach. Their argument rested on emotional distress and cultural trauma. They claimed that Omar had experienced a severe psychological breakdown after discovering Layla was not a virgin. A clinical psychologist hired by the defense testified that Omar suffered from a condition known as cultural dissociative shock triggered by a clash between traditional expectations and modern realities. They argued that this emotional state clouded Omar's judgment and control. Omar himself was called to the stand in the third week of the trial. It was the first time the public would hear his side. He appeared somber and subdued, dressed in plain suit, his hands trembling slightly as he sat. Under oath, he spoke slowly. I believed we were building a life based on trust. He said, I didn't expect her to lie or to hide something that was so important to me. When asked by the prosecutor if he felt justified in killing her, Omar replied, No, I didn't plan it. I lost control. I felt betrayed and I acted without thinking. Ramirez pressed him. So because your expectations were not met, you responded with violence. That was your solution. Omar said nothing at first. Then he whispered, I regret it every second. But the prosecution used his testimony to highlight a pattern. They revealed previous messages Omar had sent to a cousin a year before the wedding, in which he wrote, If a woman lies about her purity, she's not worth marrying. The message suggested that Omar's beliefs were deeply rooted, not formed out of temporary emotional distress. As the trial continued, the public followed closely. The story was featured in national news outlets and online discussions. Some commentators expressed sympathy for Omar, saying cultural conflict is a real issue that must be addressed with compassion. Others were firm in their stance. Belief does not excuse violence. In the final week, both legal teams gave their closing arguments. Ramirez reminded the jury that Layla's past did not cause her death. Omar's decision did. She was honest. She was brave. She wanted to build a future. And for that, she paid with her life. The defense urged the jury to consider Omar's emotional state and argued for a lesser charge of manslaughter instead of murder. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. The room fell silent as the foreperson stood and said, We find the defendant, Omar Al-Said, guilty of secondary murder. Layla's family quietly wept. Omar showed little reaction, only lowering his head and closing his eyes. Following the jury's verdict of second-degree murder, Judge Miriam Duca scheduled Omar Al-Said's sentencing hearing for the following month. In the time between the verdict and sentencing, both legal teams submitted final documents to the court. The prosecution requested the maximum sentence under California law for secondary murder, 15 years to life in prison, arguing that Omar's lack of remorse during the incident and his failure to seek help showed a disturbing level of intent and awareness. The defense submitted a plea for leniency. They did not dispute the verdict, but they asked the court to consider Omar's clean record, the absence of a history of violence, and the possibility that cultural conflict and psychological pressure contributed to his actions. A formal statement from a defense-appointed psychiatrist claimed that Omar had shown signs of emotional collapse in the months leading up to the wedding due to internal cultural identity conflict. At the sentencing hearing on September 26, 2023, the courtroom was once again full. Members of the public, family, and media watched as Layla's loved ones presented their victim impact statements. Her younger brother spoke first, his voice trembling as he recalled how his sister had always protected and encouraged him. He said, "Lila was more than my sister. She was my role model. She never hurt anyone. What happened to her should never happen to anyone." Layla's father addressed the court next. He described the pain his family endured, the emptiness in their home, and the guilt of trusting Omar and his family. He ended by saying, "I don't want revenge. I want justice. My daughter's life cannot be measured in years, but the punishment should reflect the life she lost." After the statements, Judge Duca addressed the courtroom. She explained the law clearly and fairly, stating that the evidence supported a conviction of second-degree murder, but that there were also emotional and cultural dynamics that, while not justifying the act, helped explain the depth of conflict involved. She spoke directly to Omar. "Mr. Al-Sayed, you came to this country with hopes for a better future. You found love, and that love was returned. But instead of honoring it, you allowed anger and fear to take over. You had a choice, and you made the wrong one." Judge Duca sentenced Omar ALS to 18 years to life in prison with the possibility of parole after serving the minimum term. She denied the defense's request for reduced sentencing or alternative programs, stating that the nature of the crime demanded accountability. Omar remained silent during sentencing. He nodded once when the sentence was read, but made no statement of apology or remorse. Following the sentencing, Omar was transferred to a California state prison facility outside of Los Angeles. His legal team announced that they would not file an appeal, stating that the verdict and sentence were accepted and that Omar intended to serve his time. Quietly, Layla's family later held a community memorial in Anaheim. Friends, teachers, classmates, and neighbors came to remember her life, share memories, and speak out about the need for better awareness of domestic violence, especially in cross-cultural marriages. Her mother, who had stayed mostly silent during the court process, finally spoke to the public. She said, "My daughter believed in love and trust. She believed people could understand one another. We cannot bring her back, but we can tell her story so others are protected." In the weeks after the trial, several organizations reached out to Layla's family to start a foundation in her name, focused on supporting women in traditional communities who may face pressure, isolation, or abuse. The family agreed, wanted to turn their loss into a message of hope and protection for others. The legal chapter of the case had closed, but the deeper questions raised about culture, identity, expectations, and control remain subjects of discussion in communities across the country. The case of Layla Rahmani and Omar Al-Sayed left a lasting impact on the local community and beyond. What began as a private wedding became a national conversation about expectations in marriage, cultural pressure, and the dangers of unspoken assumptions. Layla's story became more than just a crime. It became a reflection of the complexities many individuals face when living between different cultural values. Layla's tragic death brought attention to the importance of emotional safety in relationships, especially in communities where women may feel pressure to meet traditional standards without being given space for open dialogue. Her friends and family used her story to promote conversations around trust, communication, and the need to break silence when red flags appear. Schools, mosques, and community centers across Southern California began hosting seminars on healthy relationships and cultural expectations in modern marriages. A few months after the trial ended, Layla's family established a Layla Foundation, a nonprofit organization focused on providing counseling and legal support to women dealing with cultural-based relationship, stress, family pressure, or domestic abuse. The foundation also worked to educate men on the importance of mutual respect, emotional control, and building healthy partnerships, especially for those coming from more conservative or traditional backgrounds. In immigrant communities, the case sparked both discomfort and deep discussion. Some saw Omar's actions as a failure to adapt to a new environment and called for better cultural education for newcomers. Others emphasized that beliefs, no matter how deeply rooted, should never be used to justify violence. Religious and cultural leaders began speaking more openly about changing the way honor, marriage, and trust are taught, especially to young men. Legal experts also weighed in. Many pointed out that this case demonstrated the need for culturally informed legal processes where emotional and psychological factors are acknowledged without excusing harm. Judge Duca's careful sentencing and acknowledgement of Omar's background served as a balanced model for how courts can remain fair while still holding people fully accountable for their actions. In media and social spaces, Layla's face became a symbol of many things: strength, silence, vulnerability, and hope. Her story was covered in documentaries, news, interviews, and written articles. People from different backgrounds, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, connected to the story because it touched on universal themes: love, betrayal, expectation, and justice. For Layla's parents, nothing could bring their daughter back, but they found peace in knowing that her life had meaning beyond her final day. In a televised interview 6 months after the verdict, her father said she lived with kindness and honesty. If telling her story helped save even one life, then we will continue telling it. As for Omar, he remained in prison, silent and withdrawn. He declined media interviews and rarely spoke to anyone outside his legal counsel. His family moved out of Los Angeles shortly after the sentencing, unable to bear the public attention. Some relatives said they still struggled to understand what went wrong. How a man raised with so much potential ended up in a prison cell for a crime that could have been prevented with empathy, communication, or patience. Layla's story serves as a reminder that love alone is not enough to sustain a marriage. Respect, honesty, and understanding must also be present. When these are missing and when old beliefs go unquestioned, what should be a safe relationship can become something dangerous. In the end, the tragedy of Layla Romani was not only about one act of violence. It was about what happens when fear, pride, and silence are allowed to grow unchecked. Her story remains a warning and a call for change.